Alright, I am back with another video, and apologies for my extended absence. I have been, and still am, dealing with the effects of COVID. I don't know if you can tell in my voice, but I'm feeling well enough to be able to record again. Also, obviously patch 3 broke most of the mods I used to make these videos, so I had to wait for those to get patched before I could keep playing. So it was kind of just an unfortunate storm of, well, everything that could possibly have caused delays. But I am going to try and get back into a regular upload schedule, and I've got a slightly different video here. So if you couldn't tell by the title, I've got 2 builds in this video, which are 2 different build requests for character builds that I received. Long story short, the reason I decided to make these one video is because the 2 builds are actually quite similar, and I felt like having 2 separate videos that were very, very similar builds felt kind of wrong to me, so I decided to go over them both in one video, kind of doing a slightly quicker overview of each. The main reason these 2 builds are similar is because, well, one is Nightcrawler and one is Vash from Trigun, or at least builds that are close to representing them. As the way, I'm not familiar with really either of these characters, but the way they were described to me as kind of close quarters fighters, who use various amounts of like martial arts or close quarters proficiency, so of course they're both going to be monks in some shape or form. And in this case, both of these builds take 6 levels of monk. Where they deviate is the equipment and the multi-classing that comes after or before. So we're going to start with Nightcrawler. I'm not going to go over like the basic kit of monk, I'm just going to go over what the monk class offers our build, and I'll go into more detail with the multi-classing after. So obviously our first level is going to be monk. As far as your stats go, this is about what you want them to look like. You can make your constitution a bit higher if you like, but it's not really going to matter because it's going to be an odd number, so just take whatever you like here. Definitely want your dexterity as high as it will go, and your wisdom as high as it will go, keeping your constitution at a decent amount, and putting your last couple of points into whatever you like. I just chose strength here. So obviously at monk level 2 we get all the usual features like your bonus section stuff, nothing too crazy here. If you know monk, you know what we're doing. But next up is monk level 3, and this is when we get to choose our subclass as per the usual. So what kind of subclass are we going for here? Well, I think it's fairly obvious. We're going Way of the Shadow. Now the commenter, I believe it's Dexaray, who is a regular of the channel, when they requested this, basically said, hey, I kind of know this is already going to be a Shadow Monk, but, you know, what else could you do with it? So going Way of Shadow here is going to give us a lot of things that are on theme for a Nightcrawler build, but so let's go into what we actually get from this. We get a bonus action Hide for free. This is the same as Rogue, but on Monk. Very nice extra feature to play into the stealth capabilities. Pass Without Trace allows you and all of your party members, as long as you can maintain concentration, to gain a +10 bonus to stealth checks. Really, really good for getting that opening surprise round. Darkness, being able to blind enemies is always good. Dark Vision, probably not very useful in this build. I think it's only really here just in case you are playing a race like Human that doesn't have Dark Vision, but it's here regardless. And Silence to shut down spellcasters and also make it easier for you to stealth around in the spaces you create. Pretty cool. You also get Minor Illusion here, which can work for stealth plays if you know kind of how to gamify a situation, but regardless, it's a nice little feature to have for free. Now, next up, we're going to be getting our Feats. Now, you can kind of take whatever you want here, it doesn't really matter. You could take an ability score improvement. If you dumped your strength to 15, dumped your strength to 8, and then put 15 into your constitution, you could go a +1 dex, +1 con here, which is probably what would probably be the best thing to do, but I actually quite like getting the athlete feat here, bumping our dexterity up that way, because it's going to give us an extra bit of jump distance, and it's also going to allow us to use less movement after being knocked prone. If you feel like this isn't very useful since you're going to be teleporting anyway, I just kind of went with the jump distance as a nice alternative if for some reason you can't use a teleport, for example like you're out of key points or whatever, or there is an obscured area to teleport to. This is kind of a nice way to kind of do it, but you could dump strength and go for an ability score improvement here, but I'm just going to take athlete. Next up at monk level 5, we're going to be getting extra attack, which is huge, we always need that. We're also going to be getting Cloak of Shadows. If you're obscured, you get to become invisible for 10 turns. and this has the same restriction that it ends if you attack, cast another spell, or do anything that would make you noticeable. This is okay. In my testing with this build, the very limited testing that I've done, it's kind of hard to pull this off, especially when a lot of the game's fights take place in open areas. You basically want to use this ability to get the first attack in battle and kind of get a surprise round, rather than trying to use it mid-combat. I find that doesn't really work as well, but experiment with this, you might be able to do more of it than I could. Next up, we are at Monk level 6, and of course we're going to be getting the most important feature for a Nightcrawler build. We're going to be getting Shadow Step. Teleport from shadow to shadow, after which you have advantage on your next melee attack roll. This is super good. It's going to allow you to get a lot of maneuverability, similar to the Misty Step spell, although I don't think it has as much range, but fact check me on that. And afterwards you gain advantage on your next attack roll. It's super good, especially since it only costs a bonus action to use. Yes, Monk is kind of bonus action happy with Flurry of Blows, but I still feel like this is a really powerful ability that just fits perfectly on the theme. But as I said in the preamble, we're only taking 6 levels of Monk, so where do we go after this? Well, to be fair, you could just get a perfect Nightcrawler build by just going all the way Shadow Monk and getting some of those high-level features and extra feats, but obviously I wanted to do something a little bit more interesting. Now, I believe that a really cool way to go about this is actually to multiclass into Ranger. Now, with Ranger, you're going to get a few things right off the bat. You're going to get these extra little bits and bobs here, you know, like your extra proficiencies, your extra miniature abilities, nothing too crazy. Pick whatever one of these you like. You're also going to get an extra skill proficiency here, which is cool. Take whatever you like, it really doesn't matter. What we're really here for comes later. Here at Ranger level 2, we're going to actually be able to get something rather interesting here, and that is our fighting style. As you can see, I have Nightcrawler equipped with this is a scimitar, even though it kind of doesn't look like it, because again, while I'm not very familiar with the character, I do see him using a kind of cutlass-like sword in a lot of artwork and like promotional stuff. So I'm going to assume that he does use a sword at some point, so I wanted to kind of build this around that. So we're going to be taking the dueling feature. I know he does dual wield swords, so if you wanted to go that route you could, but I kind of wanted to just do this with one, since that's what I saw the most. When you are wielding a weapon that is not two-handed or versatile, you get an additional damage bonus. So yeah, it's pretty dang good. Definitely worth having on here. It's not crazy, but it's definitely worth having. Also, we get a couple of extra spells here. Hunter's Mark is always a good shot, but you could also take Enhanced Leap and Longstrider if you want that extra maneuverability. I'm going to take Hunter's Mark and Longstrider here to start. At Ranger level 3, we are going to be getting our subclass, and this is what we're here for. We want, if you couldn't have already guessed it, Gloom-Stalker. Now, this is going to give us a few things that we really want for this build. Number 1 is Dread Ambusher. This is going to really help with those early combat rounds and kind of getting the jump on foes. You get a +3 bonus to initiative, and you also get an increase of 3 meters to your movement speed on the first turn of combat, and you can make an extra for free attack that deals an additional 1d8 damage. Basically, that first attack you're going to be doing as like kind of a stealth surprise attack is going to do huge amounts of damage. Now, unfortunately, this does not work with unarmed strikes. You have to be wielding a melee or ranged weapon in order to do this, which is why I kind of lead into the sword aspect. But the whole point of this kind of build is that you use your Shadow Monk abilities to sneak in and go for that surprise attack, in which you use Dread Ambusher to go crazy. Now, obviously, if you didn't feel like the Ranger flavoring is really doing it for you here, you can instead go with Rogue to get sneak attack and kind of do something similar, but I quite like doing something a little bit different for this build, and Ranger is going, especially Gloom-Stalker, is going to get some other things that we're going to be really wanting later down the line. We also get another spell here. Take whatever you like, it really doesn't matter. Ensnaring Strength could be good. Good Berry if you want some extra healing. I'm going to just take Enhanced Sleep because it is a nice little bit of extra maneuverability in our kit. Next up at Ranger level 4, we're going to be getting another feat, and this is again another kind of take whatever you like kind of situation. You could do it for an ability score improvement, where you could bump up one of your soft stats or something. I have dexterity at 18 here, and the armor piece we're going to be getting is going to be bumping this up to 20, so you don't really need to increase dexterity here. If there's a feat you can think of here, you could take the dual wielder feat here if you did want to go with 2-sword option, but I'm actually just going to bump my constitution up to 16 for that little bit more HP. At total level 11, we're going to be getting range level 5, which is actually going to give us Misty Step as a bonus action spell. Pretty good. It will use our spell slots, of which we have 2 level 2 spell slots at this point, so you can use it twice per long rest, in addition to your Shadow Step. I'm not necessarily sure if this is better or not than Shadow Step, but it is a nice extra option to have if for some reason you can't use Shadow Step. But it just fits with the build anyway, so it's quite nice to have. You get another spell here. You also get a level 2 spell here. I mean, we already got Pass Without Trace and Silence from our monk stuff, but if you don't want to spend key points on that, you could pick up any of these here in order to be able to use your spell slots on them instead if you feel like you're not going to be using Misty Step as much. So I'll be taking Silence here. Next up is Ranger 6. You get an additional one of your favorite enemy and Natural Explorer. It doesn't matter. Pick whatever you like. It really, really does not matter to this build. Pick whatever your favorite is. And that's the build. So what do we actually get out of that overall? We get a ton of stealth capability to be able to get in there and do massive, massive damage on our first round of combat, which is about what we're looking for. We get a lot of maneuverability, being able to teleport and use the shadows to our advantage, as well as getting massive, massive damage off our attacks when we do so. Overall, I think it's a very, very unique build. I think it's one of the better ways to utilize Shadow Monk if you don't care about going all the way to 12 with it. But I do have to kind of get into something else here, because there's kind of alternate branches for this build, because the specific request that Dexray put in for this was to, if possible, get our hands on the Dimension Door spell. Now, the reason I didn't really focus on that in my initial build showcase is because getting Dimension Door in this build essentially cuts the build's power in half. You're not going to be getting this Ranger or Rogue levels depending on which way you want to go, and you'd have to drop a level of Shadow Monk to be able to get it. But if you desperately, desperately want Dimension Door and you don't care what it takes to get it, you can drop a level of Shadow Monk to level 5 and go for 7 in the Trickery Cleric domain. This will get you Dimension Door at total level 12, which sucks. So it's not really a viable option in my opinion. If you wanted to try and get it slightly earlier, you could take a 1 level dip of Wizard and go 6 levels of Cleric instead, picking up a Dimension Door scroll along the way and learning from the scroll once you have 4th level spell slots, using the Warped Headband of Intellect as your headpiece in order to get the extra prepared spell slots. But overall, if you really, really want Dimension Door, you might as well just take a look at this piece of equipment here, which is the Space Jump Boots, which gives it to you once per long rest. But overall, I have to apologize, I couldn't really fulfill this request in a satisfying way while still making a decent build. The alternatives I've provided will work, but obviously not in very good ways. So if you really, really want to play kind of a Nightcrawler build, just ignore Dimension Door and just kind of go for the stuff that I've provided here. But as we're here, let's get into the equipment. So, the Graceful Cloth. This can be acquired pretty much the second you start Act 2. It increases your dex by 2, gives you Cat's Grace, which is advantage on dexterity checks. And you only take half damage from falling as well. You also get a +1 to dex saving throws, and your jump distance increases. Overall, really, really good. This is one of the best early game armors for Monk that you can get your hands on. And from the same vendor you get this from, you can also get the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle, which is going to make your unarmed attacks deal an additional 1 to 4 fire damage and give you a free casting of Scorching Ray. This is also a really, really good little piece of kit that you just get basically at the same time as you would get the main armor piece for this build, so it's definitely worth picking up. And as always, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, anything that comes with Misty Step is pretty good, and it's thematic for this build. Also, it lets you ignore kind of all the extra stuff like M-Webbed, Entangled, Ensnared, and Grease and Ice, so it's definitely worth picking these up as they can be obtained quite easily in Act 1. The weapon here I've gone for is the Justicia Scimitar. You can get this in Act 2. If you attack with advantage, which remember, every time we Shadow Step we get to do, you have a chance to blind your target, which means you're also going to be getting in more stealth attacks from that as well. Really, really good. It's a +2 enchantment. It's just a very, very good weapon for this build and one that I would absolutely go with. It also comes with a bonus attack to the Shadow Soaked Blow. It adds your proficiency bonus to the damage and also deals an additional 1 to 6 psychic damage, but the kicker is this attack does not break concealment, so you can actually go for this attack and then start a surprise round of combat with another attack. Super, super good. Absolutely recommend this for pretty much any stealth build that we use a sword. Right, I have some extra pieces of equipment here. I've already discussed the space shunt boots. Of course, these are only obtainable in Act 3, so I didn't want to really include them as part of the main kit. But if you're not too interested in keeping the disintegrated Nightwalkers on, you can swap over to the space hunt boots after the fact. Next up is the Shade Slayer Cloak. This is obtained in Act 3, and it's a little bit later on into Act 3, so I don't want to include it as part of the base kit, but it's really, really good. While hiding, whenever you need to roll a critical hit, is reduced by 1, so easier to get a crit on that opening surprise round. It doesn't happen all the time, but anything to increase the chances of a crit is always welcome in my book. And the next up is the 3 pieces of Dark Justicia armor. Now, you can get versions of this forever easily, but these are specifically the versions that you get for committing a very, very evil act towards the end of Act 2. So I don't really recommend them, obviously, because I get that that's a character choice not a lot of people are going to want to make, especially on a build that's supposed to be based on a hero. So really, these are kind of just being showcased here for the sake that they do work really, really nicely with this build, even though I would probably just stick with the stuff that I've provided otherwise. So, the Dark Justicia half-plate, while obscured, which you will try to be a lot with this build, you get advantage on stealth checks. Neat. Basically, you're never going to fail a stealth check. You can cast Shield of Faith for free, I believe once per long rest, and also it's going to give you a big buff to your defense and damage output while it's up. You also get an advantage on Constitution saving throws to keep that shield up. Pretty good, although it is medium armor, so the fact that we took a level in Ranger means we do get to use it, but obviously if you're not too into the idea of how you get this armor, just ignore it. You also get the Dark Justicia boots, which means you can also use Shadow Teleportation once per long rest. If for some reason you didn't get to level 6 of Monk, this is an alternate option, although you could use this in tandem with Misty Step from our other stuff, but really, again, I don't think it's worth going for it. And also the Dark Justicia Gauntlets, this is going to make your weapon attacks deal more necrotic damage, which is always nice. You also get Beckoning Darkness, which is an extra spell that you can do once per turn as a bonus action. That causes your enemy to take 2 to 16 necrotic damage if it starts its turn in a lightly or heavily obscured area, which you can create with the darkness spell from Shadow Monk. Obviously, like I say, these are really, really good to have, but only if you commit an evil act, so I don't really know if people are really going to want to go for these, which is why I've not included them in the main build. So yeah, that is the build. Overall, in my testing, I have to say I don't think this build is the strongest thing I've ever made. I find that it's very, very hard to use the stealth aspects of this build once you're already in a battle. So I would definitely say kind of pick and choose your fights, go into it with the idea that once you've gotten that initial surprise attack, which you're going to be doing a lot of damage on, you're basically going to be playing a straight up regular kind of melee monk fighter from that point on. So let's move on to the next build, which is Vash the Stampede. I will go and respec quickly. Just going to say hello to my grandfather. Yep, Grandpa, we don't need to hear about, the old days. Right, so here we are with Vash. Now, again, I'm not too familiar with this series. From what I understand, Vash is a quite adept fighter. He basically does martial hand-to-hand combat in addition to gunplay with a pistol. Now, from what I understand, it was a bit tricky to make this build, because obviously the initial thing you would think of is go, oh, it's just a dual crossbow build. But I think, from what I read, the big thing about Trigun is the fact that Vash only has 1 of 3 guns, the second one of which is kind of owned by his rival, one of the main antagonists, so it felt a bit wrong to just give him a dual crossbow build, and so I actually wanted to challenge myself to make a build that focuses on only using 1 crossbow in addition to martial combat. So I've come up with something a little bit different, and I hope you guys will like it. So we're going to be starting things off as a fighter, mainly because we want the archery fighting style, which is going to give us a +2 bonus to ranged weapon attacks. Basically any ranged build wants to take this. As for your starting stats, I would recommend starting off something like maybe Strength 12, Dex 14, Con 16, maybe Wisdom 14, actually maybe pumping your Dex up. Kind of go with like the best kind of dexterity stat build you can go with at this point. For sure, don't really do the stats that I'm about to show right off the bat, but until you get a certain piece of equipment, you kind of want to play like a dexterity-based fighter, so nothing too crazy here. just build like kind of your standard dex fighter and go from there, something that looks a bit like this. But for the actual stats of this build that you would get kind of around Act 2, that you would respec into after getting a piece of equipment, you're going to want to be playing kind of with 10 dex, as much wisdom as you can grab. So I would actually put it like this, do a 16 wisdom with a base score of 14, using the +2 here, a +1 to your constitution. Go for 15 strength and 10 dex. It's a little bit of a weird stat spread, but you just gotta trust me. But like I said, use regular kind of dex fighter stats until you get to this point, and try and pick up a basic hand crossbow as early as you can. Check all the vendors that you can find. Again, similar to the previous build, I'm not really going to go over everything that you get in each level. You already know Fighter gets Action Surge at level 2, so let's move on. So with Fighter 3, we're going to be getting our subclass, and this is super important. We're going to want to be picking up the Battle Master here. And with this, we're going to get 3 maneuvers. Now, you can pick whichever ones you like. It's kind of a choose-your-favorite type of situation, except you need to pick up Trip Attack. Trip Attack can be used at ranged, as does most of the maneuvers, but this one in particular is really strong with it, as it gives you a chance to knock your opponent prone, as well as do a bit of extra slashing damage. Absolutely extremely strong on a build that uses a crossbow, because that is not only going to give you a chance to attack with advantage when using the Sharpshooter feat, but it's also a great support maneuver for your teammates to be able to do the same thing, attack with advantage. So absolutely one of the best maneuvers in the game by far. The rest can be whatever you want, it really doesn't matter, take whatever you like. I'm just going to choose Precision Strike and, I don't know, Stretching Strike, just to kind of play that bit more of a support angle. But you can do whatever you like, it really doesn't matter. A fighter level 4, we're going to be getting our first feat, and we are absolutely going to be picking up Sharpshooter as soon as possible. Now, obviously, you know what Sharpshooter does, a +10 to your damage for a +5 penalty to hit. Also, your ranged weapons do not you don't have to interact with the high ground rules, which basically means if you're lower than your opponent, you gain disadvantage. So, overall, really strong. Obviously, that -5 penalty does suck, but we are going to be using equipment to offset that to the best of our ability. Next up, a fighter level 5. We're going to be getting extra attack here, which is huge, so definitely want that. And a fighter level 6, we're going to be getting our bonus fighter feat, and in this case we are going to be taking Crossbow Expert. If you want, now we get to sort of lean into that kind of up close quarters combat, gunplay, martial kind of focus. So the way I would play this build is definitely just play a straight fighter with a crossbow, grabbing these feats along the way, and once you kind of get into that Act 2 kind of range, which is about where we are now level-wise, having both Sharpshooter and Crossbow Expert is going to do you a world of good. I just realised I didn't even say what Crossbow Expert does. I mean, it just makes it so you don't take disadvantage at close range with crossbows. So, as I already stated, now we're going to be moving on to Monk. We're going to be getting our basic Monk features here, you know the drill. The reason we're going into Monk here is because we want that extra martial prowess of being able to participate in hand-to-hand combat. And for those of you that don't know, the Gunk, which is a gun monk, is actually quite a powerful, like, kind of way to build a character in regular D&D, so it's nice that that gets a minor bit of representation here. But of course here we're getting our bonus action stuff, as always with Monk, nothing too crazy here. Now for Monk level 3, I mean, it probably seems kind of obvious, but we are going to be going with Way of the Open Hand here. It is just the best for just regular hand-to-hand combat, and it's probably one of the strongest single subclasses in the game. So, pretty good here. We're going to be getting our Flurry of Blows to topple, stagger, and push our targets. Another way to knock our targets prone is always nice. Next up is Monk level 4. We're going to be getting our final feat here, and we're going to be taking the Tavern Brawler feat, which is down here, bumping our strength up to 16, allowing for that extra bit of damage to hit, and it's just going to make all of our unarmed strikes deal way more damage. Next up at Monk level 5, we get nothing really too special. We get our stunning strikes, we get extra attack, but we already have it, so nothing too crazy here. And last up, at Monk level 6, we're going to be getting the big stuff. For Monk, we're going to be getting our Manifestation of Body, Mind and Soul, which is going to let our unarmed strikes do a bit of extra damage. Also, we're getting Wholeness of Body, which we can regain key points and get an extra bonus action for 3 turns. If you wanted to dual wield crossbows with this build, and you didn't want to go rogue, this is a way to get that extra bonus action. And that is the build. So, as far as this build goes, I actually think it's quite unique. Obviously, the strongest way to go with this build, if you really wanted that extra crossbow power, would be to dual wield crossbows. But since we're going for Monk, you don't have to have that bonus action be another crossbow attack. You can go for unarmed strikes and stuff. So I feel like this is actually kind of a different, unique flavor on that dual crossbow build. Whereas instead, we're actually going for gunplay and martial fighting. So I think it's quite a unique twist on that whole kind of crossbow sharpshooter setup. So what are we actually doing with the equipment here? Well, there's a few options here. I'm just going to kind of rearrange some things. So we're going to be going in, all of this equipment here can be obtained in Act 2, with some stuff that you can pivot into once you reach Act 3. So, first up is the Marksmanship Hat. You get a +1 bonus to ranged attack rolls and thrown attack rolls. Patch 3 finally fixed a bloody tooltip. Thank God. I was getting so annoyed having to explain that. So yeah, +1 bonus to ranged attack rolls. That is a +1 offset to Sharpshooter. Next up is the Obsidian Laced Robe. I only picked this because it's kind of like the red trench coat kind of vibe that Vash has, but obviously later armor sets can replicate this a bit better. But it's a nice little bonus because you can get it quite easily in Act 2. Also, whenever you succeed a saving throw, you get to deal fire damage to your opponent, and you get to resist fire damage, so it's a nice little buff overall. Next up, the Gloves of Dexterity. Again, you can get this as soon as you enter Act 2, and I was always like, oh yeah, you need to buy this from a vendor, but you can actually just pickpocket it if you're good enough and get it for free. It sets the wearer's dexterity score to 18. Since we're a little bit multi-ability score dependent with this build, I feel like being able to just quickly set our dex to 18 is really good, but it also gives attack +1, which gives you +1 to attack rolls and damage. So this is a +1 offset to Sharpshooter. The Evasive Shoot here, you get these in Act 2. It's just a buff to our armor class, which is always nice. Nothing too crazy here. Go with something else if you're more inclined. And our main weapon is the Hellfire Hand Crossbow. This is obtained in Act 2. Now, normally you would get this by beating a boss, but if you pick certain dialogue options when speaking to this character before you fight them, you can actually defeat them without actually having to fight them, so you can get this effectively for free. It is the only +2 crossbow in the game, which sucks. But you can inflict, but basically if you kind of go for like a sneak attack round at the start, you get to inflict burning for free, and you also get Scorching Ray for free, which is quite nice. If you wanted to go the dual crossbow route, you could go for the Near Misser in your offhand. This is basically the best option. You get Magic Missile, it does force damage, it's a +1 crossbow. It's pretty good to have in your offhand, but like I say, I'm focusing on the single crossbow. Now, if you wanted to get us another option for a crossbow, you could go for the Hellfire Engine crossbow, which, with its special ability Lightning Arrow, kind of does Vash's, I believe it's called the Angel Arm ability, where his gun becomes like this massive big thing, and you could do a really big powerful shot. So if you wanted to get Angel Arm, this is how you do it, but I'm going to be sticking with the Hellfire Hand crossbow for now. Once you reach Act 3, you can pivot into the Mask of Soul Perception, which is going to give you a +2 bonus to your attack rolls. So it's one over the Marksman Hat, and it's also going to give you a bonus to initiative rolls and perception checks, so definitely worth picking up. And then after that, you can pick up the Studded level +2, or the Elegant Studded level, or the Ballist armor, basically one of those three, to get a bit more of a Vash look. The Elegant Studded level would give you shield, and the Ballist armor would give enemies vulnerability to piercing damage when up close, so it would actually fit very well with this build, but does require you to be evil, so up to you. Basically, with the basic static level, you just get a +1 bonus to initiative rolls and take a little bit less bludgeoning damage. So yeah, that is the build. Overall, I think this is actually a surprisingly powerful setup. Your Sharpshooter attacks are going to be doing a ton of damage, but so are your Flurry of Blows. You're going to be getting a +7 damage bonus. Unfortunately, we don't get the maximum amount of damage die like martial arts die, but you still get a ton of damage off of your unarmed strikes, in addition with the ability to use your maneuvers on your ranged attacks. There's just a lot going on for this build that makes it stand out among other crossbow builds. yeah, I think that's going to do it for me. It's quite nice to get back into content creation. I'm going to still be working through the backlog of requests that I have. I've got a few that I want to go over, but I mainly just wanted to kind of get these two builds out of the way because I've been sitting on them for a long time. And with this, I have kind of killed two birds with one stone. Again, I didn't really want to make these separate videos because they're kind of similar in how they're set up, both having 6 levels of monk. So I just kind of wanted to do something a little bit different with them. But yeah, that's going to be all from me today. Next video will be another build request. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the Draconian Warrior that was suggested to me, which I've got an interesting little trick up my sleeve for that. But as far as future builds go, it's getting a bit weird. I'm starting to feel like a lot of my builds are getting a bit samey, hence like I've got 2 monks in this video. So I'm going to try and think a little bit outside the box. I might, once I've kind of gotten this little backlog of requests out of the way, I might stop doing build requests to try and make more themed builds, just so that I can kind of keep things interesting. But overall, I'm going to kind of be trying, I'll try and balance it, but I think from going forward, I'm going to just try and focus on things that are wholly unique, instead of just doing kind of similar builds back to back like I've done today. But yep, I'm going to stop now. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.